Finding a phone in a car isn't that unusual anymore, except when it leaves the car, for greener pastures, the high seas, or a leisurely lunch. Radio Shack keeps you in constant communication with their affordable, transportable cellular telephone.
What do you write to it like mail?
No, a lot of people use it and communicate with, I guess they can communicate with NBC writers and producers. Allison, can you explain what internet is?
It is hard to believe that in less than 25 years, the internet has gone from a virtually unknown phenomenon, used by a small percentage of the world's population, to an essential part of billions of people's lives. The internet has transformed communication, business, and politics, and has been a medium for interaction ever since. Today, we can carry the internet with us using our cell phone and have access to email, texting, bank statements, and GPS information. However, with such an immense freedom comes great security and privacy concerns.
Your cell phone is communicating with the cell tower about every 7 seconds, whether or not you're on a call or not, simply to say, I'm here if I need a call. So it's pretty precise information about you, where you are, and of course it's keeping a detailed log of your movements all the time, or all the time you're holding a cell phone.
The purpose of this documentary is to explain what right law enforcement agencies have in obtaining cell phone data from third-party service providers without a warrant.
The fact is that all of our cell phones are in essence portable tracking devices. That's a byproduct of how they work. So whether or not someone is actually tracking any particular individual, the capacity is there, and just as a function of the cell phone, that kind of tracking is happening.
Let's start from the basics. The Fourth Amendment protects the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures. The government may violate such protections only upon issuance of a warrant. However, the Fourth Amendment has frequently been debated during the last several years, as police and intelligence agencies have engaged in a number of controversial activities.
And most people, I think they do expect that their privacy is protected by these companies, by these third parties. I mean, by law and by contract, these companies must protect the privacy of their subscribers.
One of these controversies is the ongoing Supreme Court case Carpenter v. the United States that questions whether the government, without a warrant, can effectively trace our cell phone location information. Timothy Carpenter was accused of a series of armed robberies. At his trial, prosecutors presented 127 days' worth of cell phone location data collected from private companies. After incrimination, Carpenter argues that his Fourth Amendment rights were violated when the government demanded records without proving probable cause in obtaining a warrant.
We had this problem that came up, which is the cell phone. Because the cell phone's not just a regular phone. The cell phone is your whole life now.
And under traditional rules, under the rules that the U.S. Supreme Court has right now, he lost because they got the information from the internet company. And the internet company's considered a third party. It's like if you tell your neighbor something and the neighbor goes and squawks to the government, that's really the analogy today. And that can't be.
I'm all in favor of, good law enforcement against bad people. But at the same time, I am concerned that the net could be cast very broadly here, and a number of private lives could get swept in who really have done nothing wrong, but yet we could have Big Brother monitoring what we say eventually. So I'm very concerned about what the Supreme Court might do with this ruling.
Currently, the government considers cell phone location information routinely collected business records, rather than private information. However, more than 237 million phones in the U.S. are vulnerable to the same unreasonable searches that Carpenter experienced.
They said, we don't need the probable cause at all. We never need to see a judge because the telephone company or whatever it was, the cell phone company, gave it to us.
And what the lawyers in Carpenter are saying is the time has come to change the law and make that protected. Because that's no longer just who did you call, that tells the story of where I went.
Obviously, there have got to be changes in the way the Supreme Court has looked at the Fourth Amendment, and I'm sure all 9 of the justices think that way.
We certainly think that the probable cause and particularity requirements of a warrant will do a lot of work to focus investigations. In an investigation like this, perhaps 127 days or 152, as the original request was, would not all be appropriate. Maybe under a warrant, a 2 or 3 day span around each of the robberies would actually be particularly relevant to the probable cause determination.
The thing they've got to decide is, where on the scale of privacy does locational information relate to the content of telephone calls, who you talk to, and getting financial information from banks? Those are the big four, I think. And the question is locational, is that the biggest of deals? Or are the others bigger deals? And if you're going to put restrictions on one, what sort of restrictions on what the government can do you put on the others?
See, remember, the Constitution is a living, breathing document. And so people, hundreds of years later, have to adapt to it based on technology.
To me, if in fact Carpenter loses this, I think it's a blow against the Bill of Rights and the Fourth Amendment. And that's not to say, I'm not going to say that the Constitution is finished. That's hyperbole, of course not. You might hear that from some people. But it is just one chunk out of the Constitution that I think could be detrimental. It could be taken out of our civil liberties, which I think could be detrimental to the people.
I think it's important to understand that these are constitutional protections. Anytime you put a barrier up that says that we're going to require certain processes, it makes things harder for law enforcement. We acknowledge that, but that's built into our Constitution. That's built into the Fourth Amendment to say law enforcement can't do whatever it wants.
It just seems to be, in many ways, an assault, I think, on what that amendment was intended to do.
A decision for Carpenter v. U.S. is not expected until June of 2018. However, the case has already stirred debate over the constitutional authority over technology. If the court determines the government doesn't need probable cause to access volumes of individuals' location data, it would open the doors to a new era of surveillance. While I certainly cannot share my personal beliefs on the Carpenter case with the Supreme Court, I can hope that their decision protects my Fourth Amendment rights to digital privacy. Thank you.
Please tell us your name and where you live and where you go to school.
Yes, my name is Nathan Katz. I live in Weston, Connecticut, and I go to Weston High School.
So what's your connection with Civic Life Project?
Civic Life Project? Well, I enrolled in the contest online. I found it through social media on Twitter, and I entered this year's contest and was fortunate enough to be selected as a finalist.
Wow, so how did that feel?
How did it feel? It felt great. They put on a great awards ceremony, which was close to home in Hartford, Connecticut. So it was very thrilling to sit there and watch all the other featured finalists, and then hear my name called as the winner. So that was great, and I had a great experience at the award ceremony. I chose to explore this topic because of the recent allegations of Facebook and other cell phone companies. And really, I read an article on the Carpenter case, and it really struck me how this was an issue that not only faced one person in one town in one state, but it faced the entire population as a whole. And I think it's a big landmark case because the decision of the Supreme Court is really going to impact our lives. And their decision is going to be well broadcast over the media. And I think once the decision is made, it's really going to have a major impact on what cell phone companies can do and how much control individuals have over that information.